All right. And so the second set of lectures this week, we're going to go through the top 5 inventions of the 20th century. Kind of a fun, everyone likes lists. So this will just be like a fun exercise where I'm gonna give my top 5. You don't have to agree with my top 5. There's no right answer in terms of top 5, but these are the 5 that I think are the most influential. And then I've assigned like a short reading on each of these. Now, for each of these, you want to think about like what created the innovation, and then what popularized it or what brought it to the masses, like the institutions that both created and popularized it. And what's interesting is like a lot of these, what we'll see is, and this is what happens when you innovate, is like the results or the consequences are often unforeseen. Like it's not really the intent of whatever the invention was. It gets has a whole other effect that was completely unforeseen. And this is kind of how innovation works. It's impossible to predict. It's impossible to predict what the big innovation is going to be. 30 years ago, very few people would have predicted the internet would have the effect that it had, or people would not have foreseen. You look at Star Trek. Like in Star Trek, there's no social media in Star Trek. I mean, there's something like the internet. It's a computer that kind of knows everything, but it's not in that form. And this is how innovation works. It's impossible to predict. And as an economist, oftentimes you'll just say, well, there's going to be innovation that will like fix this problem or revolutionize society. I can't tell you what it's going to be. I can just tell you what economic history is, and that is human beings innovate. Ever since the Industrial Revolution, we're coming up with new stuff all the time, and almost no one is ever able to predict it, and it completely transforms the way we live. But again, it's hard to say what that's going to be. So, top 5 inventions of the 20th century, in my opinion, okay? And some of these I'm going to go real in depth in, and then some of these I'm just going to hit at the surface level, okay? Just I don't know, we don't have time to go super in depth in each one of these, and some of them I'm more interested in than others. You'll see, as we go through this. So number 5 on my list is nuclear power and the bomb. All right, the nuclear bomb. So where does it come from? We get the Manhattan Project in the U.S. So basically, what happens is prior to World War II, it looks like the Nazis might develop an atom bomb. And so some very influential refugee scientists, Einstein included, go to the U.S. government and say, hey, the Nazis, they're close to a bomb. You got to get on it. You got to start building this before the Nazis do. All right? And the Nazis get their hands on a bomb. Boom, that's done. World War II, over. You lose. And so the U.S. government really take this seriously and start to invest in it, doing the initial research in 1939 and really ramping it up in 1941. Okay, and again, this is spurred by Einstein himself. Writes FDR. Although he later regrets his role because it turns out the Nazis weren't close at all. And so, when we get this bomb and it's like this terrible, weapon, world-changing weapon, Einstein kind of regrets the fact that he was involved in it. All right, $25 billion in today's dollars in terms of how much they spent. Manhattan Project was infiltrated by Soviet spies, and the information stolen from the Manhattan Project by the Soviet spies becomes the basis of their nuclear program. They developed the bomb in 1945. We developed the bomb, or the U.S. develops the bomb in 1945. Sorry, the Soviets developed it in 1949. It's right here. Okay. And, we all know now, but this is, a big deal. And this bomb is, really causes the people who developed it to question, whether it was a good idea because of the destructive power and just the incredible power that it grants a government. Essentially they can wipe out a whole country. And so I'm going to play this YouTube video. I hope this works, just given the audio setup. So I'm going to play this YouTube video of Oppenheimer, who was in charge of developing the bomb. He was the main scientist in charge of developing it. And it's just, shocking, or it's just, kind of shattering to see him kind of deal with this.
We knew the world would not be the same. People laughed. Few people cried. Most people were silent. I remembered the line from the Hindu scripture, the Bhagavad Gita. Vishnu is trying to persuade the prince that he should do his duty, and to impress him takes on his multi-armed form and says, "Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds." I suppose we all thought that one way or another.
All right, chilling stuff from Oppenheimer. You could see it really weighs on his conscience, and all these guys really weighed on their conscience. Developing the atomic bomb. Whoa, what's going on here? All right. Okay. Where are my slides? I lost them. Here we go. Nope. Okay, here we go. All right. And so after the bomb's developed, we have the Korean War. And Truman makes the decision to drop the bombs initially on Japan and Nagasaki and Hiroshima. But in the Korean War, he decides not to drop the bomb, despite MacArthur pushing him to. And this sets the precedent of, that this will be a Cold War. I went over this in the Cold War lecture, and not a hot war. And essentially, what we have, this develops this theory or terminology, mutually assured destruction. Essentially, both sides, once the Soviets and the U.S. develop arsenal of nuclear weapons, both sides can credibly completely destroy the other side. And therefore, the Nash equilibrium, this is a game theory term, is that there will be no war. We're developing all these bombs to deter the other person from using these bombs. So those of you that have had a little bit of game theory, is a dangerous weapon, dangerous knowledge. But this is just like decision trees that you would see in game theory. And so you have America. If America decides to strike, the Soviet Union will decide to strike. And then you will have negative infinity payoffs, basically meaning both countries are destroyed. If the U.S. decides to back off, both countries back off, and you essentially avoid these options where both sides are totally destroyed. And so the only kind of path that doesn't lead to total destruction is for both sides to decide to back off. And so this is the equilibrium. This is the mutually assured destruction equilibrium, as both sides don't use their nuclear weapons. So this is incredibly influential because the US and the Soviets develop these weapons. It leads to the Cold War, where they never actually directly fight each other. And so essentially the whole foreign policy is shaped by nuclear weapons. So the reason why it's ranked number 5 for me, why I'm ranking at number 5, is, it's hard to say how it would have played out without nuclear weapons, but it may, we may have had a hot war and kind of got the end of the Cold War, or the end of the Cold War, earlier in the 50s or 60s. There are still lots of deaths attributed to the Cold War. So you have the wars in Vietnam and Afghanistan. You have the policies of Mao in China, which lead to, tens of millions of deaths. Not to mention the deaths in the Soviet Union because of Stalin's policies, 20 million or so. So it's not like there wasn't a lot of, death and suffering associated with the Cold War, and it's hard to say if it would have been greater or less with nuclear weapons. All right, nuclear power is the other outcome. So nuclear power kind of has, in the public perception, I've just Googled nuclear power memes, and this is what came up with. So this is my favorite one over here: nuclear power plant, spider farm. What could go wrong? So nuclear power, is the outcome of the bomb is you could use it to produce power. The same technology that would produce the bomb could produce power. But nuclear power, and again, the reason it's ranked number 5, it has not been widely used as much as it could have been used by a variety of countries. And so the negatives of nuclear power are, there's accidents associated with it, very high profile accidents. We have 3 Mile Island, Chernobyl, which was just the subject of an HBO series, Fukushima in 2011. And the other negative is the nuclear waste that's created. The positive is it's the safest energy source in terms of number of people that die associated with it. So all your other dirty energy sources create air pollution. Air pollution is really bad for you. We're seeing it's worse and worse in terms of shortening lives and then cognitive effects as well. And so it's much safer. It's safer even than solar. Apparently, people die in solar installation accidents more than they die from nuclear power. It's clean. Another positive, it's clean. It emits no CO2. So from a scientific standpoint, this thing is much safer and cleaner than most of the alternatives. And yet it's not widely used because the public sentiment towards it is so negative. So this is an example of the public perception triumphing over the science. Okay, so here's number of deaths prevented annually from nuclear power. This is because it is so clean and it contributes to lower pollution. And so we can see, this is Korecha and Hansen. The fact that we're even using some nuclear power is contributing to less deaths. But ultimately it's only about 10% of the world's energy sources. So, scientifically, it probably should be more. If you're interested in clean energy, it probably should be more. But for a variety of reasons, it's not. And the reading for this I'll have a short reading for each of these inventions. I'll link to a Vox article which kind of talks about the difficulties of implementing nuclear power in today's climate. So it's actually really hard to implement. So again, this is why it's ranked number 5. Even though it is a very clean energy source, it's not widely utilized, except in France, where I believe they get 80% of their power from it. Okay, all right, that ends nuclear power. Moving to number 4 next.